see you aren't throwing hot coffee at my face.
Oh
boy. We got a lot to talk about this week.
Oh, it's going to be a rollicking good time. Before we get started, I just want to say one thing, which is that I may have been a little overly harsh in my judgment on Thor Ragnarok last week.
Okay.
It's a good time, and it is it's a real movie, and I forget that that's the curve we have to grade these things on. So it is a good time, and it's very well put together, and it's got a lot of really good stuff in it, and I think I would recommend it. I definitely didn't not like it. I did enjoy it quite a bit. It's just my roommates have been harassing me quite a bit over my decidedly more reserved than they were praise for the movie.
Well, like the way you made it seem last week, you made it just kind of seem like it's slightly better than the normal Marvel crop, and we are just so thoroughly sick of that Marvel crop. I'm
just pretty much over it. The only reason I'm really seeing them is because I'm going through the motions at this point. Like, listen, look, good for everybody involved. I could not be less interested in Black Panther. I'm sorry.
I just see all these, like, I don't give a shit about Captain Marvel. We already had Wonder Woman. We've already broken the barrier. I don't know why this exists.
Well, I don't want to say that.
I mean, like, more female superheroes is always a good thing, but I am not looking forward to Captain Marvel.
Yeah. I just don't know. When Doctor Strange showed up in Thor, I'm like, oh yeah, the Doctor Strange movie was a thing. I haven't thought about that since I saw it.
Maybe that's why they, like, try to, like, pad these things so much with, like, little references to other things. Like, they're scared you'll forget they exist. No, like, I guess, like, I mean, Derek French put it best when Civil War came out. It's like it's a television show, and it's 8 fucking season. It's like, how can you care this much?
It feels like they're on their 12th season now. I
was trying to directly quote him.
Yeah, well, I'm just over it. But, you know, Thor Ragnarok is a good time at the movies, and you could certainly do worse.
Okay, I will say this, like, one of the movies we did try to pirate was Thor Ragnarok, because, like, Alex is a huge Norse mythology fan, and we didn't want to have to see that movie in public. But alas, the only version we could find was Portuguese, so we had to decide on another movie.
Oh, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, welcome back, everyone, to the Hack Fraud Show. This is our next installment in, I guess, the Noir-vember series that we've kind of started clucking along here.
Yeah, we kind of stumbled into this.
Yes, although I do have a different idea for next week that we might want to get to.
That isn't more German expressionist filmmakers?
No, it's not. Ooh. It's something quite different, but we'll get to that in due course. Anyway, this week we're looking at 2 classics of the noir period from the 1950s. Oddly, both Columbia movies.
Yeah, that was this. Which I will say, the Columbia logo at the end of "In a Lonely Place" was one of the most jarring things I've seen all week.
Also, both of them star Gloria Grahame, who I'd never seen in a movie outside of "It's a Wonderful Life," where she has a very, very small role. So that was interesting. But we'll get to those momentarily. First, hey guys. What you been watching?
Well, Reed, why don't you start?
Hold on. How about you?
Okay. We'll start with something I don't hate. One of the things I had to watch for my documentary class was, I think, like, one of the things this class is currently going through is, like, we've now seen, like, all these weird movements and things outside the mainstream. Now we're being shown the mainstream and just kind of seeing how we respond to that and what that mainstream voice means.
Yeah.
So one of the things we watched was a little documentary. I think the guy's name is Bill Nelson. Let me go to the internet to find this out. Let me see. Stanley Nelson. I was really wrong. Okay, so it's made by Stanley Nelson, who apparently is like a documentarian auteur.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been told. I have no experience with him outside of this. And this is like a big, like under 2 hours, kind of. I kind of called it like an introduction to the Black Panther movement.
Okay.
Which is fine for my viewing eyes because, like, I know practically nothing about the Black Panthers outside of, like, vague pop cultural notions, and I assume, like, most of us are in that camp.
That's about where I'm at.
Yeah, because, like, just, like, the Black Panthers is just something we don't talk about in America all that often.
Yeah, that is true.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, you get weird things like Beyonce dressing up as one during the Super Bowl, but other than it's kind of just, like, vague pop cultural notions at this rate. So, like, I am not against, like, just kind of, like, a basic sort of, like, straightforward PBS documentary about the Black Panthers. And, like, it is pretty... It's pretty breezy. Like, it's got, like, this kind of chapter format that kind of, like, breaks down each sort of, like, segment of Black Panther history into, like, little easily digestible bits, which, like, for someone without this prior information is probably pretty helpful. It's got everything you'd expect. It's got lots of archival footage and photos, talking heads, wall-to-wall music, etc., etc. And, like, it's fairly interesting. Like, it does show, like, the divisions. There's, like, something about the divisions within the party that are really interesting. Though, like, one of the things that are noted, and, like, we were told, like, to read, like, reviews from, like, people who had, like, great objections to the film, including, like, one of the former Black Panther leaders who was actually in the film. Oh. And she said, like, it works to, like, it strives to, like, undermine, like, the revolutionary content about it. Because, like, the way it presents it, it's, like, it's just, it kind of sees it as, like, oh, it's Black Lives Matter, but in the 70s and with guns. And, like, there's, like, an entire, like, 10-minute segment on, like, the fashion impact of the Black Panthers and bullshit like that. But, like, there's only, like, vague notions about, like, how they were kind of Marxists and how, like, they really did want revolution. They really wanted to tear it all fucking down. They weren't here to, like, say, like, it was not the Martin Luther King, you're like, oh, hey, let's work within reform.
Right.
It is, we need to tear this shit down. And, like, they really don't mention that all that much. And there's also, like, the North. One thing I noticed that, like, there's a lot of music in it. It's all, like, blues, Motown, soul. It's all black music. It's not protest music. It's not even really anything that has to do with the Black Panthers. It's just all vaguely black music, which is distracting. But, like, you know, like, just from what the Black Panthers are a really interesting group, if this documentary has not lied to me. I don't think it's entirely lied to me.
Yeah.
So, like, I think if you know nothing about them, I think the best audience for this is, like, people who know nothing about the Black Panthers, and, like, and I think we're all in that group. So I think maybe we could all glean something from it. So I thought it was kind of like a breezy little 2-hour sort of brushing up on a piece of American history we don't get that much about. So
that's interesting. What was it? What was it called?
The Black Panthers: Vanguard of a Revolution, from 2015.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, apparently.
Apparently,
it was trending on Twitter.
Oh, recently?
That means nothing. But, like, it's got its issues and, like, its little institutional woes, but I think it's all right.
Well, if I could just could I just ask? You say you're moving into the canon in this documentary class. Do you know what movies you might be watching in the upcoming weeks?
Well, I can go to the internet and see that.
Well, it's not that important. I was just curious because
I don't know. I don't know what we're watching this week.
I'd love to know if you're going to watch Grey Gardens, what your reaction to that movie is going to be.
Oh shit. Here's the thing. If they were going to show us Grey Gardens, I think they would have already done that.
Oh man, great.
I think we're past Grey Gardens.
Grey Gardens I saw in a freshman year film class, and that is one of the worst viewing experiences I've ever had.
Like, the way y'all talk about it, I'm almost excited.
Oh.
Really infamous things fascinate me.
Well, it's not even infamous. People like it. People praise it often. Yeah. It's one of the greatest documentary works of all time. I frankly don't see it, but, you know, whatever.
Regardless, yeah, you have properly hyped it up for me.
Oh, goody. Well, what else have you been watching?
We're going to watch Grey Gardens, but if Grey Gardens comes up, You know I'll be talking about it.
I'll be here for that.
But I think that's been it for this week. I think I watched like a bit of MASH, but kind of same, pretty much all the same things I said in the last time. It's pretty funny.
What about
sometimes really, really sexist?
What about the other thing? Unless you don't want to talk about it.
No, I want to talk about it because there's a lot to unpack here. Okay, here's just something to say, like, because this is something that, and I actually find this exercise really helpful, is that, like, me and the Columbus crew of Alex and Matthew just love picking apart bad movies. It's just one of the things we do. We just love sitting out in a room and picking this shit apart. And I actually think that's a very helpful exercise.
Yeah.
Because, like, especially when you're in a film school, you are always being shown things that, like, you were told have value and are good and should catch your viewing eye. But, like, I think one of the most helpful experiences for, like, a critic or a filmmaker is seeing all this shit go horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And the thing that caught our viewing eye this week was the Adam Wingard Death Note movie.
Yeah.
This is almost incomprehensible.
Uh-huh. Now, I don't know a whole lot about this movie. This is a live action adaptation of a manga?
It was a manga, then it turned into an anime. Now it's a live action abomination. That's the trajectory we're going at here. I have no experience of the Japanese incarnations. Yes, that's right, you spoon read. This is a train wreck. But okay, let me kind of go into. It's about like a kid who is in this cartoonish Seattle school where like people just beat up on the women all the time. Just a normal thing. No one explains it. They're just evil.
Okay.
But then, like, one of our characters who was revealed to us by, like, him helping a bunch of people cheat on homework, a book literally falls out of the fucking sky with Death Note written on it.
Roll credits?
And then we're introduced to, like... William Dafoe.
Oh, Willem Dafoe. I love Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, William Dafoe's in this movie as, like, this weird, like, spiky monster thing that accompanies this book called Ryuk. And he is kind of Satan mixed with meddling bureaucrat. Because, like, the thing about this manga anime bullshit is that, like, this book called The Death Note, you write a name, and you can kill someone. And, like, of course, like, the main character is an idealist, so, like, they see, like, oh, I can do some good with this by, like, killing people.
Let me read that back. Oh, I can do some good with this by killing people.
Yeah, that's exactly... That's... Here's the thing, it is just as sudden as I make it seem. And, like, and of course, like, you have, like... You know, William Dafoe is actually really interesting in this movie because he's both being, like, really theatrical and William Dafoe, I'm faux Green Goblin. But, like, he's also just about, like, explaining rules and regulations to us. And, like, there's, like, 97 fucking rules with this fucking Death Note. And all of them are vague and ill-explained. But, well, first of all, the movie looks terrible. It is like there's some interesting lighting here and there, but there's just like a shocking sense of like it's the kind of bad that you only get from people who like try to think they have a distinct style, where just like all the wrong decisions in all the wrong places. Like the most prevalent editing choice is the wipe that they use with cars. Like a car drives by and that's the wipe. They use that in 90% of the fucking cuts in this movie. It is ridiculous, and there's always like sound effect that goes along with it.
Oh man!
Like the acting is utterly atrocious. Like the person who finds this death book and like says like, "Oh, I can do good by killing people," is terrible. Like it is a performance made seemingly entirely out of like all the awkward Tobey Maguire faces from the early Spider-Man films. And it's hilarious.
Oh
and, like,
my goodness.
And like then there is also like a girlfriend he acquires. And like, okay, let me just tell you like one of the big things about this is that like there's a bunch of gore in this movie.
Uh-huh.
And apparently, like, the manga and anime aren't gory at all. It's just, like, he tells them to have, like, heart attacks and things like that. And there's, like, a genuine progression to these things. You know what the first death in this movie is like?
Tell me.
Well, what happens is that he writes down decapitation. And then this proceeds to happen. There is a basketball that rolls out into the street, stopping a car, nearly causing a car accident, making a utility truck swing by the bully that he wants to kill. The ladder comes forth and chops his head off.
Well, that sounds amazing!
And it's so fucking funny.
I'll say this for Adam Wingard. I mean, say what you will about the guy. Yeah. He knows how to make an entertaining method of killing someone.
Yeah, but like it is just so wildly misjudged because like it's the movie's trying to be about like morals and dichotomies and like what is the value of a life? But when you see half of somebody's fucking head roll into frame, I think that's kind of all out the goddamn window. There's when he tries to get his like pseudo girlfriend on his side to help him with killing lots of people by like he pulls up a live feed of a hostage situation and then writes down this for the man to kill him to kill the guy who's taking his wife and kids hostage. He will go outside, pause, do a military salute, and then get hit by a car.
Okay.
And of course, like everyone in this movie explodes into like a giant gush of like limbs and blood.
Mm.
And like that's supposed to be like the like, whoa, yeah, you can do this. Isn't this? I believe you. And you know what they do next? They say, I know, I'm going to create God. I'm going to make a bunch of people, like, kill themselves and write down this name so they think there's, like, some omnipotent deity out there. And, like, there's at one point, there's, like, a rush of, like, newspapers, and one of them says, unironically, is God real?
Tell you what, I mean, this sounds pretty entertaining.
Yeah, well, of course, like, the Adam Wingard style, it is far less... It's not quite as cuckoo banana... Actually, it is kind of as cuckoo as bananas, but it's just so, like, all wildly misjudged. Like, the plot of this thing is just utterly incomprehensible. It's like, they just pour, like, rules on you, and, like, they try to explain, like, moral dichotomies, and there's just a bunch of fucking plot holes. And, like, there are characters that are, like, introduced to us, and, like, oh, we should know who they are, but we know nothing about them other than, like, they sit weird. And there's, like, so many fucking logical leaps in this movie. Like, at one point, like, the thing about this, like, you can only kill people who you can only kill people who you can visualize their face. So, like, one guy who wants to catch... there's one guy who is fucking deduced that, like, oh, this god must be some fucking Seattle kid. We are not explained that at all. Just the thing. And so he goes to meet the Seattle kid, and like he reveals that like, oh yeah, this kid is God. So he immediately takes off his mask, revealing his full face for no reason.
Well,
maybe it got sweaty underneath, and he's like, okay, well,
and like there was an entire like the end of this movie is like a chase scene where like two dumbasses can't remember if they wrote their names into books, and like there is this movie's a mess. I can't even fucking remember what happens. All I know is like there was like a hilarious scene where like there's like a terrible CGI disaster at a Ferris wheel, and like the two like murderers fall out of like the Ferris wheel. And, like, a note that needs to be burned lands conveniently into a fire next to a homeless person. And there are just, like, these terrible, like, slow-motion footage of both of them doing Tobey Maguire troll faces. And, man, was this fun to pick apart.
Well, you know, I just have nothing to say.
Was
I mean, I hope I just made this seem as, like, wildly misjudged as I think it is.
This sounds pretty wildly misjudged. I mean, man.
I mean, yeah, there's even, like, an M. Night Shyamalan style thing where a bunch of people calmly walk off like a ledge to kill themselves.
There's an homage to The Happening in this movie.
That's what we thought when we said, like, oh, it's not quite The Happening. They at least understand that, like, hey, if we make it so they're, like, comically falling into frame, it's not going to be as effective. This time, it's just a big wide shot.
Mm.
Wide shot of them splatting on the ground.
Well, this sounds truly terrible.
Yeah, William Dafoe is fun.
Oh, he's having a hell of a year.
No wrong.
He's having a hell of a year. The man might win an Oscar, and he can also claim to have been in what sounds like the worst movie of 2017.
No, well, the worst movie of 2017 was the fucking Emoji movie. That is, like, one thing we all agree upon. It's like, we're never going to see a movie as, like, shamelessly awful as the Emoji movie.
Tell you what,
year.
I forgot you saw that movie.
Look, man, I haven't forgotten.
Oh, you can never forget.
I can never forget. Like, that is the most shameless movie I have ever seen, and it is shocking.
Well,
but yeah, do any of you guys want to see this movie?
No.
no.
I have no interest in putting myself through that.
I almost recommend it as, like, a hate watch, because, like, some of it is just so fucking funny. And, like, some of you just have to go, like, what the fuck were they thinking?
See, the only hate watch film that would be in my proper movie canon would be The Room, and that's it.
That's it. Well, I think, like, there's something to be said about, like, this, and Movie Bob talked about this in, like, his Batman v Superman, like, giant dissection.
Yeah.
Is that, like, the part of the reason Batman v Superman is so awful is because Zack Snyder legitimately has a style. And it is sometimes, like, in like, the failure to have style that truly awful filmmaking comes about. Mm-hmm. Because, like, bland, like, cookie-cutter filmmaking can only warrant so much of a misjudged reaction.
Yeah.
And, like, in Wingard's trying, like, there is, like, some not good, but interesting lighting and, like, some, like, okay compositions. And, like, there is, a sense to try and give this thing a style, but, like, it backfires at pretty much every opportunity, and that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Well, it does sound like perhaps a worthwhile viewing experience for all the wrong reasons.
Worth something insofar that, like, as, like, someone who is, like, really interested in why movies fail.
Right.
And I am one of those people. Like, my, like, cinematic gaze was started by trying to explain, like, why some movies are just so awful and just disagree with me so much. Regardless, that's all I can talk about this week.
Alrighty then. Dr. Reed.
I hope that wasn't just, like, incoherent and utterly abominable an explanation.
Oh, that was fascinating to listen to. At least I thought so.
Okay, that's good.
But, that's something I will have to think about for a while. Dr. Reed, what have you been watching?
Well, I've been thinking about it for a while, meaning 90 seconds. 90's a big number, sure, but the time unit, not so big. Okay. So, I'm sorry, John. So, this week, I got to sit down and then watch part of the Geography 101 film series. Kill me. It's almost over. It's almost over. It's okay. It's almost over.
Oh my god.
Well, it's provided us with some interesting stuff. What was the entry this time?
Yes. So this was much more interesting than some others, but kind of. So we watched Mark Zinger's documentarian, British documentarian Mark Singer, whatever, in his debut American documentary, Dark Days, which follows the so-called Freedom Tunnel in the 90s, part of the underground New York City's Underground Railroad system, where in the 90s people, homeless people, build shelters out of scraps they found throughout the city. And they were living in squalor, but their homes seemed pretty cool as shit for, finding that. So this was a film shot largely dark and white on 16 millimeter camera, and it's very much a documentary type of style. You see the homeless people that live in the tunnels say that this is sort of like their home away from home, but it also falls into sort of talking about why they're there in the first place, and as well as, concurring problems with that as well. And also, probably one of the more interesting bits is seeing a guy, I don't know if he's in love, like an ex-soldier or whatnot, but he's got a shirt that says 1992 Republican National Convention. And I'm like, oh, well, oops. Party of personal responsibility says oops.
You know what this sounds like? There's like a fascinating subset of YouTube called urban exploration, where people like sneak into like areas of the subway you're not supposed to go to, and they're just like full of like homeless settlements and like abandoned stations, and things like that. And like I think all of those are super fascinating. So like this sounds like something I might like.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this has an arc, so we see all those disappear. So it works through a sort of like a tight-knit community, and then just as we get to know them, we learn that this takes place over time in the 90s. That Amtrak, who owns the tunnels, says, "Guess what? You have 30 days to leave." But fortunately, there's a happy ending where they get grants from the HUD, and then they all leave and then get apartments, and it's a happy ending.
Oh.
And everyone is smiling and tearing down their shelters made. So.
This sounds really interesting.
Yeah, this sounds really, really fascinating.
So, yes, I recommend. This was probably one of the better movies seen.
Well, it's no Bend It Like Beckham.
No, that is the king.
Masterpiece.
That's the masterpiece of the series, which is unfortunate to say, but it's still a good movie. Not to knock it. And probably one of the bigger highlights is that the music in this was produced by DJ Shadow. That's the name on the music credit. And
is it good music?
You'll have to find out. But yeah, I recommend this movie. This is also a fairly short watch. It's captivating. Our puppy dog's in this. So
well, I may yet check it out.
Of course they're matted.
On the side note, those YouTube exploration, like urban exploration videos are actually really fascinating, where you just get idiots with camcorders go into the subway, into places they're not supposed to go, and they just kind of, sometimes they find cool shit, sometimes they find nothing, sometimes they almost get caught by the cops, or get run over by fucking trains, because it's the fucking subway. And it's all like, and it's both like, and you both get a kind of like sick thrill out of it, from both kind of like schadenfreude from when they almost get run over, and just genuine like, hey, this is something we're not allowed to see. And that's pretty interesting.
To just to comment on your bit about people getting run over by trains, to quote me on the 8th of November last year, oops.
Yeah, it's kind of a common thing where people almost get run over by trains. It's just kind of what happens when you go into the subway when you're not supposed to.
Who are these people?
God bless these troopers.
Yes. Thank you for your service. Was it the first Amazing Spider-Man or the second Amazing Spider-Man? when Peter Parker goes to this abandoned subway car in Roosevelt Station, which is debunked and no trespassing allowed, and then there's like a secret lab, and then
I think that's the second
That's
one.
the second. That's definitely the second one. I remember those movies well enough to know that's the second one.
He finds that by, like, smashing his calculator against the wall and subway fare comes out, and he goes, oh, this must go to that abandoned station. This must be connected to my dad.
Oh, man. And it is!
Yeah.
Do you remember how much those movies aggressively tried to set up a fucking mystery with...
Oh my god, the fucking, like, end of, like, 2, where there's, like, a giant
that
row
movie
of
falls
costumes.
dead.
Oh, man.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 falls dead. I'm not afraid to say that.
That movie is both awful and fascinating.
It's a fascinating document of the cinematic universe movie moment when everybody was trying to do it before we all realized that nobody except Marvel could do it.
Which is exactly what, like, this like dark universe from Universal is going to be like.
Oh. Are they still pressing on with that? I know they had some changes in management.
I don't know.
Oh.
But part of me wishes it keeps on.
Well, we'll see what happens there. Is that all you have to report on, Dr. Reed?
Yes.
Alrighty.
I think what we're learning so far is that we kind of love train wrecks.
Yeah, well, I certainly have enjoyed my fair share of train wrecks, but I have no train wrecks to report on this week because everything I saw was really good. Yeah. So I saw 2 movies that I think will end up on my list of best of the year. First was I saw Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird, starring Saoirse Ronan. Really good movie. Very, very fun, very charming, but also very heartfelt and feels very personal. Greta Gerwig has just been kind of this growing tour de force presence on the independent scene for a long time, and she's now emerged as a fully formed artist and filmmaker in her own right. And this movie's really good. It follows Saoirse Ronan as the titular Lady Bird, which is a name she's given to herself. In her senior year of high school at a Catholic school in Sacramento. And there's apparently a lot of autobiographical elements to it. Her mom is played by the wonderful Laurie Metcalf, who I assume will get some awards recognition for this movie. I've also seen the trailer for I, Tonya, that Tonya Harding biopic starring Margot Robbie.
Oh, yeah.
That looks like it's going to be a movie, but from the looks of that, Allison Janney is also going to be a major player in the award season, and having Laurie Metcalf and Allison Janney in the same category might be too much for me.
To be honest, in the I, Tonya trailer, I thought that was I kind of thought that was Tilda Swinton.
Well, I haven't seen this trailer.
And it was Allison Janney. Like, oh damn!
You should watch it. It's an excellent trailer.
I might do that right after this podcast.
Oh yes. Anyway, but Lady Bird, it's a really good movie. I'm really not sure how much you would like it, considering it is better than this movie. But I know you didn't make it all the way through the Edge of 17, and this movie is dealing with a lot of similar stuff. Although it feels very real. It feels very honest, and there's just a lot. It's got a lot going for it. The performances are great. Tracy Letts, who I really haven't seen in that many things, but I've always heard is very great. He plays her dad, and he's just a wonderful screen presence.
Okay.
Laurie Metcalf's great. Yeah, it's just a wonderful little movie, and it's very, very funny. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. And let's see. Then just earlier today, I went out and saw Martin McDonagh's 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And we like Martin McDonagh here on the show.
We love Unbruised. We haven't seen 7 Psychopaths yet.
Yeah, I still have not seen 7 Psychopaths, but my friend rides pretty hard for it, so I may end up watching that fairly soon.
It's a fascinating episode on it.
Yeah, I really do want to see it. But yeah, In Bruges is great. And, as shitty as this year has been, and as kind of scattershot as far as the movies have been, when a movie has been great this year, it has been pretty fucking incredible. And this movie is that. It's unbelievable. I was floored by this movie. It's so, you cannot predict where this movie is going at any point. It's all crazy escalation. It's just, it unfolds in the most unexpected, twisted, crazy way possible. It melds like the darkest of comedy with searing drama. Frances McDormand is incredible. This is like the anti-Fargo performance, I think.
Interesting.
Even though she is kind of on sort of a moral crusade, but the methods she uses are questionable. There is no right person in this movie, with the possible exception of Woody Harrelson, and the characters are so well drawn. The performances are incredible. Sam Rockwell plays this cop, and his performance just has so many layers to it. Lucas Hedges of Manchester by the Sea, and Moonrise Kingdom. He also showed up in Lady Bird. He's in this. He has just been quietly the MVP of this year. He's great, and there's just so much in this movie. It is often brutal. It's hard to watch at times. It is relentless. It is unflinching. It is spectacular, and this is, I love In Bruges. This movie might be better. Like this movie might be Martin McDonagh's masterpiece. He has a unique skill for making movies that have all kind of the thematic and character-driven richness of plays, but that could only work on screen. And
he is the playwright with a very defined and articulate cinematic style, and like, who else is like that?
Yeah, like, for all the great dialogue in this movie, this isn't one of those movies where it's just a yak fest. There's some great visuals in it. It's just, it's very invigoratingly made. It's just, it's a masterpiece, and I cannot lavish enough praise on this movie. Certainly not for everybody, perhaps, but I would recommend it to both of you, and to anyone who's listening who would be interested in seeing, who thinks they were interested in seeing this movie, or perhaps saw the trailers and was like, perhaps. I would highly recommend it.
Well, Tyler, you are speaking all the right words and my language, so the moment this shit comes here...
if it won it, ultimately.
No, it's only playing in 2 theaters in Los Angeles right now, so it may be a little bit,
it'll take off. But I have 2 must-watches I must see before 2018 hits.
Yes. Anyway, that's all that I've been watching, so that's what we've got. So, shall we get into the noirs that we viewed this week?
Yes, we shall.
All right, where do we want to start?
Read.
I'm a bit cold, so I need the big heat.
Okay.
The 1953 Fritz Lang picture, Rotten Hell, Reed, about a sergeant in the police force who is just like really sick of the mob, and like he begins kind of like this moral crusade, and things go in circles and sometimes bad.
Yes. So this movie stars Glenn Ford as Sergeant, what's his name? Banyan.
Banyan, that's right.
Dave something Banyan.
I think it's like Dave Banyan.
I think it's Dave. Anyway, he seems to be the one moral cop on the entire force. Do they ever say which city they're in?
I recognize that at a certain point. Like, wait a minute, where is this?
Because they reference Chicago, so it's not Chicago, but I'm not sure where it is. Like, at one point,
it's New York?
At one point, the gangsters, like, step out onto the balcony, and there's this glorious, like, metropolis type of cityscape, like, behind them.
I guess I just realized that it is like the kind of America one gathers from like a foreign filmmaker.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in this movie. Basically,
there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, this guy just kind of goes on this long, the movie starts with a suicide, with a police officer killing himself, and
it wastes no fucking time. We start on the gun,
yeah,
and just one big shot where he falls on the desk, and we pan up to his wife, who has no expression. And it's like all that lovely pulp noir shit.
Yes. And it's just basically classic boilerplate noir stuff, zigzagging through various twists and turns as this guy works his way through the case he's not supposed to investigate.
Yeah, and like as he uncovers more, the more it costs him.
Yeah. I guess I'll start with this, which is that there's a lot, like, this movie is much, like, darker and more violent and, like, at times more grotesque than your typical film of this period.
This is a movie that, like, this is 1950s pre-Scorsese, where the mob is treated not like there's something like to say about like how Americans like mythologize the mob, especially coming out of the Prohibition era.
Mm-hmm.
But on this, they are wife beaters, they are murderers.
Yeah.
A woman gets hot fucking coffee thrown onto her face and is permanently disfigured.
Yeah.
And like, man, in the fucking night in the Code era, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, I guess this is just kind of the touch of Fritz Lang, like, working its way.
Just,
like this
there
feels...
There is a sinister underbelly to this movie that I don't think any other noir around it could capture.
This feels like stuff you would find in some of his, like, German expressionist work, I think.
Yeah. If anything, I think it's more intense than some of his expressionist work.
Yeah. And, like, there's at one point, one of the big turns of this movie is that this guy's wife dies in a car bomb explosion?
Yeah, and, like, it's not, there's no, like, pulling her out and, like, oh, last word. She's just fucking dead.
Yeah.
We see the body.
Well, like, when he pulled her out and, like, I saw the body, I was kind of like, oh, okay, so she's probably gonna live, but no! They cut to the next scene, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I saw you at the funeral. I'm like, whoa!
1950s, no!
That was very surprising to me.
Oh yeah, it's shocking, and like they talk about like, and they talk about grief for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then this man begins his hell-driven, violent rage against corruption in this vague American police force.
It's a lot of really interesting stuff. Some of it is kind of like a little kind of typical like boilerplate stuff, but like what?
Yeah, there's like this all has the bones of noir.
Yeah, but what fills in the cracks in this movie is very, very interesting.
Like the femme fatale. This is...
Can you even call her a femme fatale? I mean...
She is just, like, broken and just, like, angry and has nowhere to run and, like...
This is Gloria Grahame we're talking about.
Yeah.
Who plays a very different kind of role in A Lonely Place. But
yes.
She is really good in this. She gives a very kind of strangely empathetic performance, even though, like, you kind of start out thinking, like, oh, geez, it's one of the shrieking or classic Hollywood females, but she brings a lot of pathos to it, and it's a really interesting performance.
The revenge-filled rant she has at the end?
Yeah.
Fucking gold!
Fucking gold!
Fucking gold!
I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. There's a lot of very interesting stuff going on here.
Yeah, I really like it, and it's a lot more kinetic than most noirs. Like, I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot to be said about like how like the brilliant light work and like how dynamicism comes from how they arrange the compositions, but like there's just a lot of like loose mobile camera work in this that is like that's straight from German expressionism. Gee, I wonder why that is.
Reed, what did you think of The Big Heat?
It definitely warmed me up. Kind of burnt, but not too bad. Yeah. So, John.
Yeah.
So, for your film essays, you've hyped up Fritz Lang quite a bit.
I really love Fritz Lang.
Why? I can see why. I think this is my first ever Fritz Lang film I saw, and boy, does this move.
Oh, you haven't seen M?
No.
Oh, we gotta change that.
Oh yeah, M is a masterpiece.
So yeah, with the fucking car bomb. Like, oh my god! Like,
there's just he's putting his daughter to bed, and the fucking car explodes, and we see it flash in the window.
Yeah.
And it's really jarring and scary.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, fuck.
This movie...
For me, like, the holy shit moment is the coffee pour, where I just go like, holy shit!
This movie goes there, man.
Oh, yeah.
And the movie doesn't stop at, like, at one point you go, like, she's just gonna have the cover over it, we're gonna be tasteful with that. But no, she rips that shit off, and she's got some monster makeup on.
Makeup. Yes.
This movie's fascinating.
Yeah, it's so much more complex, and I mean, even though the lead character is like this kind of moral crusader, like he seems just like kind of a man like just pushed straight over the edge by what these guys have done to him.
He's the man on an edge to an extreme.
Yeah, but they really make it work, and he comes across as like a very kind of real guy who is like trying to do the right thing, but just has this fire in his eyes and is willing to.
I mean, I don't think the movie strays away from the fact that like his like crusade against the mob is really violent and really forceful, and like he'll just fucking punch people out of nowhere, and that doesn't go unanalyzed.
And I think there's really something to that, what you were talking about, like with how much we tend to glorify the mob. Like these are like. You get the feel like these guys are like people who did really well in Prohibition and now are just kind of coasting off of that success and have kind of moved into the modern age and are just kind of barely hanging on to their power, even though they still play cards with the police commissioner.
And what's more, like, this isn't like the playing with diamonds, like really cartoonish mob. Like, these people are scum. Yeah. And they don't shy away from that. They are violent, they are forceful, they openly talk about rigging politics. Which is fascinating.
Yeah, this is like as close to Goodfellas as you kind of get in the Hollywood.
There's like we don't really get to this place with like, because like you have to remember, like 20 years later you get shit like The Godfather.
Yeah.
Which is like all about like, that is like the romanticization of the mob for as much as we love it.
Well, I wouldn't call it's the mythification of the mob. I don't know if I would call it the romanticization of the mob.
I'd say it's fairly... It's more romantic than this.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's certainly true. But, The Big Heat. Super interesting movie. Fucking Fritz Lang. I didn't even mention our old friend Lee Marvin from the man who... Liberty Valance himself is in this movie. Yeah. He's great.
Man, what a great film.
Yeah. Really, really, really compelling.
Yes.
So that's The Big Heat. But,
I don't think it's quite the star of the show.
Oh.
What? Yeah.
It's time to talk about In a Lonely Place.
In a Lonely Place. 1950, directed by Nicholas Ray, starring Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Grahame, once again.
Yep.
So, Humphrey Bogart plays Dixon Steele. Which I can't say with a straight face, but...
yeah, I love it.
Yes, he's a Hollywood screenwriter who fought in World War II and has kind of been in a career slump ever since. He kind of whiles away his nights at the local bar.
He gets into fights. He's really easy to rile up.
Yeah, and he has given this book that he's told he has to adapt into a screenplay. He brings home like a coat check girl who read the book to tell him the story.
He just could not be fucking bothered to read the thing.
Yeah, he brings this girl home, and in the scene that you're prepared for to be creepy as fuck, especially.
But it's really charming.
But yeah, it ends up being kind of just a like sweet little thing, and then she leaves, and then
her ginger ale, and like just gets on his robe and says, "I can't think in my robe."
boy, I'll tell you what, when he, like, puts on his bathrobe, I was all prepared for something really, really, dated to go down.
1950s, no.
Yeah, but it's totally fine. She leaves, it's all good, and then she turns up dead. And
she turns up dead in a really gruesome way, too.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, oddly more connections to the Big Heap here. Like, they both feature, like, women who are, like, thrown out of moving cars and die, like, really gruesome deaths. And so basically, Dixon Steele is the prime suspect, but he has an alibi that is backed up by his neighbor, played by Gloria Grahame, and they kind of fall into this kind of whirlwind romance. And you start off thinking Humphrey Bogart is going to be the lead of this movie, but it kind of, about around slightly before the halfway point, it shifts, and Gloria Grahame starts to kind of take over the movie.
Yeah, and then it becomes about, like, her conflicts and her, like, issues.
Right, it basically...
Like, it starts to become, like, there's almost the threat of Humphrey Bogart more than, like, his presence.
Right. And, I'll just say, though, like, Humphrey Bogart is incredible in this.
Holy shit. Holy shit.
This is, like, this character is so interesting. He...
Yeah,
like...
there was, like there was something to be said about, like, Humphrey Bogart always plays Humphrey Bogart. He is a very particular actor.
Yeah.
But there was just something about, like, the dichotomy of what he does and his performance is utterly engrossing and utterly fascinating.
Yeah. This character, like, he has this crazy temper. He will fly off the handle at any moment, like, with the slightest provocation.
Yeah. And, like, can I just say this real quick? Like, this is a 1950 code movie where, like, the threat of domestic violence is always in the air.
Yeah.
And, like, where the fuck else can you see that?
And it's it's treated as, like, a very real, very scary threat.
Oh yeah, it becomes about how, like, Gloria Grahame is terrified.
Yeah. Like, she at one point says, like, I can't live with this. Like, I cannot do this.
I'm scared to say no to him.
Yeah, like, and you really do, like, they talk a lot about how, like, he kind of hasn't been the same since the war. Like, you get the feeling that, like
you just don't see in the 1950s.
Yeah. And this was, like, 5 years after World War II ended.
This is, like, there's something to be said about, this is kind of like our preconceived golden years for America. And to see, like, someone talking about, like, yeah, I went to war and it fucked me up in 1950 is pretty revolutionary.
Yeah. It's really, really compelling. And not a whole lot happens in this movie. It's not the most entertaining thing, but, like, just the thematic stuff they're dealing with. And, like, there's also that incredible scene where he goes over to have dinner with his friend on the police force and his wife, and he, like, basically describes exactly how he would have committed the murder.
Yeah, and it's just like, what are you doing? And then it becomes about, like, this man's crazy.
Yeah, like...
But then, like, there's also, like, you get people who's like, oh, that's just dicks.
Right.
That's just him. And, like, but the movie doesn't accept that excuse.
Yeah, like,
it takes Gloria Grahame's position.
You really feel like this guy could have killed this woman.
Yeah.
And, like...
And it even becomes like, you start second-guessing what you actually saw in the beginning of the movie.
Right. Like that... And then there's that other scene, kind of linked, where he kind of gets angry when they, like, kind of bring it up that the police are still suspecting him, and he and Gloria Grahame get in the car, and he just drives like a fucking maniac, and she's like, Dix, what are you doing? Stop. And he just seems like a madman, like a man possessed in that moment.
With a fucking rock.
Yeah. Jesus. And
it doesn't shy away from that. But yet, this is still the same movie that has, like, a character who talks only in thespian voices, and, like, a bunch of just, like, really charming dialogue and characters. And, like, it's also about, like, Hollywood, kind of. Yeah,
this is another movie where, like, both of these movies, actually, like, the kind of the supporting characters feel very, like, fully sketched out. Like, that actor, that washed-up actor who's constantly drunk and spouting grandiose Shakespearean lines. Dix's agent, who is, like, just trying his utmost to get this guy to work again.
Yeah. No, don't listen to me. I'm the guy who told Selznick not to do Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. And in this movie is also like feels like a remarkably honest portrayal of Hollywood at this time.
Oh yeah, like everyone just kind of watched. Everyone saying like, "Yeah, I write shit." Oh yeah, I write shit too. Maybe one day it'll be good, but like, oh shit, I need to adapt this book here. Just come to my house, just read it to me. I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
What do they want? The book? Oh shit, I don't care. Like there's like a real rock hard cynicism to like this movie's depiction of Hollywood, and it's mostly made of like the broken pieces of this system.
Yeah.
It's not about stars. Like there's even one point like somebody asks him for an autograph and he says like who am I, and I think the person who gives him like the autograph book says I don't know. And then like another person reads like he's nothing. Like she's right, you know.
It feels like a writer like laid it all out on the line with this, and you know Humphrey Bogart does too, and Gloria Grahame does too, and it's
goddamn the ending.
The ending.
No happy ending. There's not even really a resolution.
Yeah.
He just walks off, and like we don't know what the fuck will happen next.
Yeah. Like and the twist, which you do kind of see coming, but
yeah, but like the movie sets you such on an edge that like wait, are they going here?
Yeah.
Are they not going to go there?
Yeah. So like basically this woman, the dead woman's like boyfriend or whatever confesses, but by this point it's too late. Like Humphrey Bogart has kind of shown, you know, the ugliness inside of him, and you know Gloria Grahame she just can't go back. And
this is after he nearly chokes out his fiance.
Yeah, like
even
though we know that he didn't kill anybody, we now know
like,
that he could have.
Yeah, and that's all you need.
Right.
God, I love this movie. Like this is such a shocking movie.
Yeah, it's got a lot. It's got a lot to it. There's just this movie contains just a lot of really interesting layers, and I think we kind of lucked out this week. These movies are both just super interesting products of this era in Hollywood,
like,
and
like not just like 1940s kind of like pulpy darkness where it's like it's all everyone's corrupt and that sort of thing. There was genuine shocking darkness about these.
Yeah. And
like I can just only imagine like what their reactions might have pulled.
Yeah. I can't fathom it. These I mean we are used to this kind of darkness in movies now, but it's still jarring to see just because...
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Because, like, you get to the moment of, like, I think I said this last week, like, old Hollywood movie, it's going to get dark, but not too dark. It's never going to get uncomfortable. We're never going to see really any violence. So when shit happens, it is legitimately shocking.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's the sort of thing, like, the Code era, you just don't see it coming. So when a man nearly chokes out his wife... you go, holy shit, what am I watching?
Yeah.
A movie from 1950, movies from the 1950s shocked us.
Yeah. That's...
like, basic, like, Code era Hollywood film noir shocked us.
and I saw 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri today, which is, this is a movie where, at one point, a dentist's drill goes through somebody's finger. So, the fact that I was still shocked by these movies... says a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also something to be said about like the earnestness for which like these movies show. Like there is no like glorification of violence. Like anytime you see violence, it's like wide shot. Like we don't really wide shot, kind of obscured. Whereas like nowadays, like we live in like the horror film era. Whereas like violence is almost like fetishized in a way. Like the slasher film is a super popular thing now. So when you see like people take violence really earnestly, it's anxiety provoking.
Yeah, for sure. So that wraps up 50s Noir Week, and
great week.
Yeah, this was an interesting week. But next time, I have an idea.
Ooh.
We've been watching a lot of kind of heavy stuff lately.
Yeah.
I would like to maybe do some comedies next week.
Okay.
And well, here's the thing. We've talked about this before, and I still haven't done anything about it. I still haven't seen any Marx Brothers movies.
I am all for this.
I think
I am all for this. Alrighty, buddy.
Well,
Buddy boy.
I had an idea. We could do one Marx Brothers movie, and then there's an Ernst Lubitsch movie called To Be or Not to Be. Do you know about this movie?
Did the Vidians cover it?
That wasn't one of the ones they watched, but
Yeah.
let me pitch this to you. I think you'll be interested.
Okay.
It's a comedy. It's set in Warsaw during World War II. It's about this troupe of actors who are like running from the Nazis.
Ding, ding, ding! You have sold me! Congratulations! You are now able to see this movie next week.
All right, so
the golden phrase in that was running from Nazis.
Well, you already had me sold at Warsaw.
I knew that would get you.
Yeah.
But then I'm thinking we can also watch one of the most acclaimed Marx Brothers movies, which would be 1933's Duck Soup.
Soup. Yeah, I am all over this week.
All
I
right.
have never seen a Marx Brothers film, and that is a great hole in my film watching presence.
Alrighty, let's do it. All right, Duck Soup and To Be or Not to Be coming your way. This should be fun.
Oh, goodness.
And Duck Soup is
Sounds
really
interesting.
short.
Well, how long is To Be or Not to Be?
To Be or Not to Be is about 90 minutes, but Duck Soup is like 70. So
Okay. We've been really looking out these past couple weeks.
yeah. Although it's soon, I want to start watching. Not that I have a problem with this, but soon I want to start watching some movies made after the 1950s.
Yeah, that'd be something that would be something we could do, and we can arrange that.
Something in color, perhaps.
Well, we can find. Hey, maybe we can find another Powell and Pressburger movie. Who knows?
Ooh, I would be on board for that.
It sounds nutritious, what we're going to watch.
Yeah. I don't know. Granted, I assume Duck Soup is way too much sodium. God, that's the worst joke I've ever made on this podcast. Never let me do it again.
Hey, I didn't make the obvious joke about the big heat, which is
Oh, yeah.
when the car bomb scene happened. I was like, oh, there's some big heat. I'm so sorry.
Man, I would have gone straight for the coffee joke.
That too.
That's where I would have gone.
Oh man. Okay. All right. We're done.
We
Goodbye,
are
everybody.
veering somewhere we shouldn't be.
Are you going to be watching Hoop Dreams at any point?
No.
Oh. I really want to see that movie, but it's three goddamn hours long.
I can't even fucking watch the Florida Project. I can't. How am I? Okay.
What?
There's way too many women getting scolded with hot coffee jokes in this.
Ugh.
Shit, yeah, you're right.
Well, it's
No, he does. Joe, she does scold him at the end. So,
yeah.
which I just started just laughing a maniacal laugh after that.
All right. Well, the cursor on my computer is frozen, and I might be having some trouble here.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Well, let's just pray that it recorded because I can't do this.
No, it's still recording.
Okay,
I
we got something.
just can't stop it.
Interesting.
Let me
Granted, QuickTime has fucked me over today too.
let me try this.
I was trying to record someone's screen for like this because I had to do like something shooting for OSU today, and like for whatever reason, like this woman didn't have enough fucking space on her laptop for me to be able to put it into be able to save it. So I'm just left here like okay, I guess you're just gonna have to email it, and I haven't gotten anything. So.
All right,
I might be fucked.
Let me try this. I might be offline for a hot second.